rules are established.
Oh, well.
Exactly.
Back in question. Yeah, he'll be here second.
That doesn't help.
Who's doing? Are you secretary?
I'm gonna help with that.
Well, I'll have Ben in. I'll have Ben in.
Well, yeah, Benny, I was wondering if you're
Ryan, I'll stop talking.
We'll move on.
We are live.
All right, well, good morning, Creekside. We're going to get rolling. We're not exactly sure. We got Luke coming? Yeah, because we really don't want me leading worship today. Amen? Amen. So it is good to see you here. It's good. It's again good to be back, and great job spreading out. So all those kinds of things that we need to do. So again, make yourself feel comfortable. We have encouraged those who are more comfortable in mask again toward the back. And you're not worried about mask things to come closer. So again, thank you for doing all those things. And we're still learning through all this, and those guidelines continue to shift and be a work in progress as we go along. A couple of things I do want you to be aware of. Next Sunday, we're doing an Easter egg hunt. Since we didn't get to do that earlier, we want our kids to be able to enjoy that. And so next Sunday, we're going to do that in between the services. So that's going to be at 10 o'clock. We've got plenty of property, and the only thing that'll change that is if the weather gets rainy or something like that. But we'll let the kids spread out. We're going to have 3 different sections for the kids to do that based on their age group. And so we do have some eggs that need to be filled with candy and little tattoo things. And so we need at least 5 from this service. When you leave today, grab a bag of some eggs that you can just fill those things up. You may have to buy a little bit of extra candy to go in there. We've given you enough to be a starter in there. So anyway, if you can help us out with that, again, 5 of you as you go out, there'll be a bag, and you can just grab a bag, and we appreciate your help with that. So that's next Sunday. So right in between the services. So one group stays a little late, one group will stay a little early, but we'll be outside and properly distanced. So anyway, that'll be next week. And then again, students are meeting tonight at 6 o'clock. If it's too windy to be outside, they'll be gathering in here similarly to how we are gathering today. So that one is tonight. And then let's see, did I miss any other announcement that we need to? Oh, Operation Christmas Child. I don't know why I looked at you for that. But in Operation Christmas Child, if you saw the message this week, we're still receiving our items for Operation Christmas Child. We are behind now, obviously, because we did not meet in person so long, and I know how it is, out of sight, out of mind. But we are trying to collect enough items to do 500 boxes as a church this year. The most we've ever done is 100, and that's been having everyone bring them in. And what we're doing is we're gathering items for different age groups, and in November we're going to have a huge packing party. So as a church, we're going to get together, we're going to pack things together, and we're going to try to fill 500 boxes. You can imagine not only with what's happened even in our own nation, but around the world. There's so much economic forecast for really bad situations that there are going to be a lot of kids around the world who wouldn't have a Christmas if it wasn't for Samaritan's Purse and Operation Christmas Child. So it's a great chance for us. This is the month we're collecting items for 5 to 9-year-old boys. We were in quarantine while we were receiving things for 2 to 4-year-old boys and 5 to 9-year-old girls. And so those are the age groups that we really need to make up for the most. But as you think of items we can bring, and there's a lot of items that are good for all ages, but as you find those things, if you would bring those things in, and we've got a collection area out in the foyer there. So anyway, I believe that's most of the announcements. So let's stand, we'll pray, and we'll have a time of celebration together. Father, thank you for today. God, you are good, and we are so glad that we are able to come together online and in person. So we ask that you would just fill this place with your goodness, your glory. Give us open hearts to hear your word today. In Christ's name, amen.
Is built on nothing less than Jesus' love and righteousness. I could not trust the sweetest friend, but wholly lean on Jesus' name. All of the ground is sinking sand. All of the ground is sinking sand. Darkness seems to hide its face. I rest on His unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my river holds within the veil. On Christ's solid rock I stand. All of the ground is sinking sand. All of the ground is sinking sand. His covenant is love, support me in the whelming flood. When all around my soul gives way, in it is all my hope is laid. On Christ's solid rock I stand. All of the ground is sinking sand. All of the ground is sinking sand. Shout out with trumpet sound. Oh, may I hear and be proud. Rested His righteousness alone. All this to stand before the throne. All this to stand before the throne. We lift our banner high. We lift our banner high. We lift the name of Jesus. From age to age you reign. Your kingdom has no end. We lift our banner high. We lift the name of Jesus. From age to age you reign. Your kingdom has no end. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever, forevermore. You are victorious. You are the only King forever. Almighty God, we lift you higher. You are the only King forever, forevermore. You are victorious.
We're going to sing one more song this morning, and this is together just an expression of what our hope, what our faith, what our trust is in. It's in the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Not in just a doctrine, but it's in the person of God Himself. So in this time of desperation, when all we know is doubt and fear, there is only one foundation. We believe. In this broken generation, when all is dark, you help us see. There is only one salvation. We believe. We believe. In God the Father. We believe in Jesus Christ. We believe in the Holy Spirit. And He's given us new life. We believe in the crucifixion. We believe that He conquered death. We believe in the resurrection. And He's coming back again. We believe. Let our faith be more than anthems, greater than the songs we sing. And in our weakness and temptation, we believe. We believe. We believe in Jesus Christ. We believe in the Holy Spirit. And He's given us new life. We believe in the crucifixion. We believe that He conquered death. We believe in the resurrection. And He's coming back again. Let the lost be found and the dead be raised. And here and now, abundant faith in the church with God the Savior. We believe, and the gates of hell will not prevail. For the power of God, the joy of man, we know your love will never fail. We believe, we believe in God the Father. We believe in Jesus Christ. We believe in the Holy Spirit. And He's given us new life. We believe in the
tonight and saying, we believe in you, we trust you, our faith is in you. God, help that trust continue as we open your word together and consider what it means for how we should live and challenges ways that you might have us change that. Pray in all that we be surrendered and submitted to you, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Good to see you.
A rushing mighty wind. Amen. I don't know about you, but watching the tree over here in the corner blow over during the last song, it's like I talked about Pentecost the wrong Sunday. Should have done that last week, should have done that this week. Well, you know, life has been disrupted. A lot of what we know and what we experience has been disrupted. And when things are disruptive, things at times get very hard, maybe even disturbing. John Eldredge, who's a Christian author and psychologist, was talking the other day about just the great increase that they're seeing in their field of people battling depression and all kinds of anxiety issues. And it's just off the charts right now in uncharted territory as far as people reaching out and seeking help, because life, when it's disrupted, can cause a lot of problems for us. And fortunately, we do get some insight and some help for a disrupted life from the Bible. And as we work our way back to Easter, let me just kind of help you put yourself in the shoes of another. Many of you have followed Christ for a period of time in your life. I want to put you in the shoes of someone who had been following Jesus around. Someone who had heard him teach. Someone who had seen him care for others and heal others and work miracles. Someone who believed that Jesus was going to change the world and followed him with reckless abandon. And then he watches the person he admired most be arrested, be placed in jail, and crucified. That had to be a disruption of his faith development. That had to be a challenge for any of the disciples to go through that moment. To see the person you admired most, the person you believed was going to take the world by storm, killed. And the Bible tells us that one such disciple was so disruptive that he kind of disappeared from the group. And his name was Thomas. That Thomas decided, whatever happened, that's not what I was expecting. That's not what I was looking for. And I'm not sure what to do with it. And so he becomes a wanderer in the city. I think about his story often. Perhaps it's because Thomas was the subject of the first sermon I ever preached. So I've always had just a special place in my heart for Thomas. But I've watched a lot of people come to a place in their life when they are confronted with a faith that has been disrupted. And I've watched them struggle through that disruption. I've watched them struggle as their faith is disturbed. And I've watched some people disappear into the crowd. And every time, it breaks my heart. And so let me tell you something right up front today. Something I want you to know. I want you to know that people will let you down. Your own faith will at times let you down. But when we have an opportunity to stand face to face with Jesus, He will not let us down. And that's what I want to remind us right up front as we look at our text today. John chapter 20, today, verse 24, says, "But Thomas, called Twin, one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came." This is after He was resurrected. So the other disciples were telling Him, "We've seen the Lord." But He said to them, "If I don't see the mark of nails in His hands, put my finger into the mark of the nails, and my hand into His side, I will never believe." A week later, His disciples were indoors again, and Thomas was with them. Even though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then He said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and look at my hands. Reach out and put your hand and put it into my side. Don't be faithless, but believe." And Thomas replied to Him, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said, "Because you've seen me and you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." And I just believe this story to be such a powerful story. And for Thomas, we're working our way back to Easter. So we started at Pentecost last week, and we're working back to our church's Easter celebration, which will be next week. But as we work backwards, we all have those moments in life where we feel like our faith is moving backwards. I've been there. You've been there. If you're a person of faith, you know at times in your life it has worked backwards. And you've seen people who have come close to faith and then backed away from faith. We have seen these stories play out over and over and over again. And why do things work backwards? Why do we sometimes go backwards in our lives? I think the first thing is when we're disappointed. It's when we're disappointed. Life is filled with disappointments, isn't it? Yesterday in Elizabeth, our seniors had their graduation ceremony, but for many of them it was a bit of a disappointment. It wasn't what they expected. I was so excited to watch my daughter's senior year of track and planned to go out and watch a couple of races and watch her finish her career. That was a huge disappointment. Life is filled with disappointments, isn't it? When you don't get the job, or you don't get the promotion, or things don't work out the way you want. When I think of disappointment, one of the stories that comes to mind is Ralphie in The Christmas Story. You remember the moment when he got his secret decoder ring? If you've seen that movie, A Christmas Story, he waits and checks the mail every day because he had worked hard and saved everything he needed to get so he could get his secret Orphan Annie decoder ring. He locks himself in the bathroom, and the message is coming out over the radio, and he's decoding this important message which said, be sure to what? To drink your Ovaltine. What? A crummy commercial? That's the secret message? What a disappointment, right? Life is filled with these disappointing moments. And that's what happens a lot of times with faith. When we expect Jesus to work a certain way, and He doesn't work the way that we think He should work or the way we want Him to work, there's disappointment in that. And I would like to tell you that we should all be bigger than that, but the truth is that sometimes all of us are disappointed in the way that God works. He said, my ways are mysterious, and my ways are higher than your ways. And the truth is, we're never going to get our mind around them. I will never understand why God chooses to intervene in some situations and chooses not to intervene in other situations. I will never understand sometimes why evil prospers and good seems to suffer. I will never understand all of that. But part of the struggle of faith is coming to the place where we recognize that God's ways are higher than our ways. And so while we struggle with it, it is okay to struggle. But we cannot live in the area of disappointment in our lives. But that's where Thomas was. Thomas is disappointed. He takes off. Now, I got to tell you, taking off, why was that a big deal? Because the disciples were scared. They were together because there was a little bit of safety in numbers. They were gathering in this room because that's where it was kind of a safe place. Thomas, who was a little bit known for his brashness and his boldness, he's out there. One of the cool other stories about Thomas is that when Jesus had waited extra days to go back for after his friend Lazarus dies, they all think that going back would be a sure death sentence. And Thomas says, well, if Jesus is going back, let's go with him. I'm ready to die. I mean, bold. It wasn't that there was a problem with his boldness. It wasn't that there was a problem with his courage, but he's disappointed. I followed you, Jesus. I went everywhere you went. I watched you do all these things. What was the net result? Jesus died. So he's disappointed. Then he was discouraged. Now, I know I'm stepping out on a limb, and I'm telling you how Thomas feels, and we're not completely given a picture of how he feels, but I think this is a reasonable limb. I think he was discouraged because of all that he saw that took place. And I think discouragement is very real. The disappointment moves to discouragement very easily. And I think that Thomas was a very discouraged individual. You know, and I look around what's going on in our world right now. There's a lot of things that, if we're not careful, will leave us discouraged. There's a lot right now that will just make you want to step on your own chin. But we must not allow our disappointment to become discouragement. But let's be honest, we all get discouraged, right? It happens. We don't mean to, but we get there. And we have to be able to acknowledge the discouragement. So if we can acknowledge the disappointment, we're going to do better. If we can acknowledge the discouragement, we're going to do better, because the next step is where it really gets hard. And that's when discouragement becomes disillusionment. When our discouragement becomes disillusionment, we are really far down a very negative pathway. And I believe in just a few days' time, Thomas really kind of got to that place where he was disillusioned, because he gave us that statement, that famous statement, unless I see the proof. In other words, I walked with you guys for years. I've seen you guys. I know what you guys stand for, but I don't believe you anymore. I don't trust you anymore. I would say that's a pretty disillusioned place for your best friends. I would say that's pretty crazy territory in his life. And so he basically said, you're not playing any Jedi mind tricks on me. I'm not going to believe it unless I see it. And I sense that real sense of disillusionment in his words. Everything I stood for, everything I did was for naught. Now, as we stop in this story right here, I want every single one of us to pause and think for a second. This is someone who walked with Jesus, someone who touched Jesus, someone who laughed with him, who cried with him, who journeyed with him, who saw his power firsthand. Now, if he can struggle, does it not make sense that we too are going to struggle? And one of the things that we've not done a good job in our church cultures of doing is allowing people to have the freedom to struggle and to not give up on them. We've just not done a good job with that.
But I want you to note something in the story. Who did not give up on Thomas? His pals. His pals did not give up on him. They went to him and said, Thomas, come on. Come on back. Come check out what's going on. And so what did Thomas do? They finally got him back. So let's talk about how we get back into the forward position when we've been going backwards in our faith. How do we get back into the forward position? First of all, we got to get to the right place. We got to get to the right place. What is amazing to me is that Jesus appeared to Thomas when Thomas got back to the people of God, right? The greatest movements of God have begun with and are always going to take place where God's people are gathered together. Now, that's gathering in person, that's gathering online, but when God's people gather together, that is where a prerequisite for God's greatest activity to take place. In other words, the church is still God's idea and God's plan for propelling his power forward into the world. God loves the church. He created the church to be a difference-making force. And so we need to remember that that is so important. Thomas had walked away. But over and over, the Bible tells us that the church is important. Even if we take it pre-church, because the church was formed after the resurrection of Christ. But even if we take it into the old synagogue format of the Old Testament, there's a Psalm of David. He says, I was losing my step, but then I went to your house. It's so important for us to remember that the church is essential. And so we want to encourage people. If you know someone who's walked away, if you know someone who has stepped away from what's going on, do what the disciples did. Encourage them back to the right place. Encourage them back to a place that should be a loving place, a place where we can ask our questions and struggle with people who do truly care about us. Get to the right place. Here's the second part of that. Get to the right person. We need to get to the right person. Now, I want to kind of do something a little clear. I have a little notation here. The resurrected Jesus. The resurrected Jesus. So many people only want to point to the earthly Jesus, the pre-resurrected Jesus, as all that we really need to see. But if we forget the resurrected Jesus, we lose something in the process. We need to remember the power that he truly does have. Because no one else, as while he was alive, said, no one else has the power to give their life and to take it back up again. And so there's something in the resurrected Jesus that we need to see. And so we don't want to limit Jesus to just what we saw in the character of while he walked on this earth. We do have to remember that he's God incarnate, God in flesh, God who made his dwelling to live among us, but also the one who's coming back and saying, I'm in charge, right? And so we want to remember the resurrected power. And so he's powerful enough that the whole world, every single person, will bow down before him someday. And that's what Thomas was recognizing. When he saw Jesus, and Jesus said, stick your fingers here. Look at this. Embrace this. Thomas is like, this is not just any man. Because no one else could do what he has done. And so he is powerful enough so that the whole world will bow before him. He's exclusive enough because there's no one else who can earn our salvation. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And we can only do that because he gave his life and took it back up again. The resurrected Jesus. He's empowering.
Because he's able to take our sin and cast it as far away as the east is from the west. And while I can't cast away the sin in my own life, I can't even forget the sin in my own life, God says there's no record of it any longer. No one else has the power to do that apart from the resurrected Christ. But he's also unwavering in his call for us to surrender to him as Lord because of who he is and what he did. He said, if you will come after me, take up your cross and follow me. Our way is the way of the cross. And when the resurrected Jesus reminds us that while he had the power over the cross, which is why we can take up the cross, because on the other side of the cross is the power of God. If we don't take up the cross, we'll never know the power of God. It's essential that we do it. So we got to get to the right person, the resurrected Jesus. And then we want to get in the right position. We want to get in the right position. Now, what is the right position? It said, Thomas said, my Lord and my God. Now, understand how John wrote his gospel. I'm going to give you just a little bit of a theological insight on the book real quick. John tells you in the beginning that I'm not hiding anything from you. This is who Jesus is. He was God in flesh who lived among us and walked among us. And said, I just want you to know that up front. But he built it back in. So what he says in John 1 is in essence reiterated in Thomas's testimony about who Jesus is. And so he spent the entire book saying, this is where we came out on the other side of the cross, on the other side of the resurrection. This is what we learned. And then he builds everything up so that Thomas can make this grand declaration of who Jesus is. And so he built it back up. He takes us back into that circular thing that John is talking about. And so it's this really cool thing. Now, we don't know what Thomas's position, he didn't say he just threw himself on the ground before Christ or anything, but what he did when he says, my Lord and my God, what is the word Lord? It is someone who is an authority over another. And so he is giving himself. And then, of course, God is in authority over all of us. And so the right position is submission. The right position is submission. And we struggle with submission. I was reading yesterday just an article about, it was saying that if you are into shaming people for not doing what you think they should do, in essence, stop it because it doesn't work. And so one of the examples was a mask. So if you are really value wearing the mask and you're out in public and you go somewhere where they say, we encourage you to wear a mask, and you look at someone and say, why aren't you wearing a mask? They said that the likelihood is that you have encouraged that person to never put on a mask because we don't like being told what to do. Does that sound familiar with anyone, that you just don't like people telling you? I mean, I was talking to someone else this morning and said, I wasn't bothered at all to be inside until I was told I had to be inside, right? I mean, that's how we all are. We bristle, right? We don't like it when we are told what to do. But the right position is submission. You know, there's an old illustration about a captain of a ship who's looking in a dark night, at a dark night. He's looking out there across and he sees another light. And they say, and he sends a message out. And he says, change your directions 10 minutes, or 10 degrees south. When the other message comes back, it says, no, you change your direction 10 degrees north. And this captain, who was angered, felt like his command had been ignored. And so he sent a second message, alter your degrees 10 degrees south. I am the captain. Another message was received, alter your 10 degrees north. I am Seaman 3rd Class Jones. And immediately the captain sent a third message, knowing the fear that it would cause in this young person's heart. Alter your degrees 10 degrees south. I am a battleship. Then came the reply, alter your course 10 degrees north. I am a lighthouse. There often comes that time where we get to that place and we say, God, I'm the battleship. God, I'm in control of my destiny. Jesus says, but I'm a lighthouse. Don't we need to submit to God? To yield to Him? And that's what Thomas was saying when he bowed before God. He said, my Lord, my God. He said, I submit to you. For Thomas, that was a long 10 days. That was a long 10 days. But God brought him through on the other side. And he, in all likelihood, died a martyr's death. Some believe that Thomas might have traveled the furthest of any of the disciples in sharing the gospel, which would be fitting of his personality. His take no prisoners personality would have certainly taken him as far as he could go. But how much stronger he came when he faced the disappointment, the discouragement, the disillusionment. And he got to the right place, the right person, and the right submission. May that be true for each of us. Would you pray with me? Father, I want to thank you for today. And I thank you that you are at work. Lord, I pray that we would give our discouragement over to you. We might even have some senses of disillusion. God, this is not what we signed up for. But God, I signed up for something that will last forever. And I know that to be true. Many of us in here have that testimony. And if there's someone who doesn't, I just pray that you would work in their lives, that you would reveal yourself to them. And God, we give this time to you to move in each of us online, those who are gathered here in person. God, speak to our hearts. Let us see you for who you are. In Jesus' name, amen. So I just want to invite you, where you're at, to just bow and have a time of prayer. As our worship team leads us in just a short time of response, I want to allow you to have an opportunity for God to speak into your life. Maybe you would say that I'm a little disappointed, a little discouraged. So here's what I'd like to do. I want to pray for you as a church, because I've been there recently. So would you all just bow your heads for just a moment? If you say, Pastor, I am really battling some disappointment, discouragement, disillusionment right now. Would you pray for me? Would you just raise your hand? I really do just want to be able to pray for you. No embarrassment, no one else. This is just us today. But would you just slip your hand up? Pastor, could you pray for me? Thank you. It's not always easy, but I am going to be praying for you. Thank you. God can work in our hearts in these times. So as we make this little song a declaration of our hope, just pray that God would keep you in the right place, in front of the right person, in the right position. The worship team's going to lead us.
We trust you, God the Father. We trust you, Jesus Christ. We trust you, Holy Spirit, and you're giving us new life. We trust you, God the Father. We trust you, Jesus Christ. We trust you, Holy Spirit.
Spirit, and you're giving us. Stand together, we're playing that together. We trust you, God the Father. We trust you, Jesus Christ. We trust you, Holy Spirit, and you're giving us new life. We trust you, God the Father. We trust you, Jesus Christ. We trust you, Holy Spirit, and you're giving us new life. God, we do choose together to trust you, to come to you with our doubts, not hold those back from you. Bring those together to you, and ultimately to submit and surrender to you. Amen. Well, don't be seated. We're going to go ahead and dismiss you in just a moment. A couple things. If you're new to Creekside, you'd like to know how to connect with us, if you would go to www.creekside.cc, there is a place to fill out some information, and so we're trying to collect most of our information virtually. We do have cards in the chair behind you. You're welcome to fill one out and put that in one of our offering boxes against the back wall as you go out today. And that's the other announcement, that we do have offering boxes that are out. If you brought your offering today and would like to share that, there's 2 white boxes right in front of our sound area. And so feel free to drop that in as you leave today. And again, you're welcome. You can go out one of these exits or those exits or whatever, but we would ask that everyone, if you came for the first service, to make sure that you give us at least 15 minutes of, that you're out of here by 10:15, just so we can get everything ready for the next service. So thank you for being here today. It is so good to be back in person. Take us out.